guys, I'm Samantha.
And I'm Selene.
And today we'll be answering an important and hotly debated question about the Spanish Civil War.
So, the question we'll be answering is, how did Hitler's hate to Franco's regime impact the future of international relations?
The Spanish Civil War, although very limited regionally, had a large impact on Western international relations at its time, as a result of Hitler's aid to the war. Some may argue that this impact is rather exaggerated, as it was not Hitler's intervention, but a series of other acts by other nations that resulted in altered international relations. These people are strongly mistaken. Adolf Hitler's impact to Francisco Franco's nationalist regime resulted in great changes to the future of international relations in Europe. The renewed confidence and strength of Nazi Germany, the forced isolation of the Soviet Union, and the appeasement policies adopted by Britain and France elucidate the validity of this statement.
The renewed power and strength of Nazi Germany serves as a prime instance of a change of international relations. Prior to the Spanish Civil War, Germany still lacked the confidence and power that it had prior to World War I. It was still suffering under the strict boundaries laid by the Treaty of Versailles and was largely at the mercy of France, Britain, and other allied powers. This all changed during the Spanish Civil War with the successful testing of war tactics and aircraft, developed alliance between Mussolini's Italy, and increased devotion of the German population to the Nazi Party. Germany was able to test many of its planes by sending never-before-tested planes to the nationalists. These included the Arado AR-65A Enkel EH, 112V9 Enkel EH, 112B1-B2, and Junker Ju-60. The Luftwaffe was also tested its tactique through the testing of Panzer I tanks and the act of the Condor Legion. The Condor Legion successfully transported fighters, dive bombers, and pilots. Perhaps the most important tactique that Luftwaffe exercised was its city bombing and carpet bombing techniques and the bombing of Guernica, which Hitler said could not have been described as a complete success had the bridge, which survived the attack completely unscathed, been the only target. Even though German General Heinz-Göring said the deployment was on too small of a scale to allow accurate assessment to be made. The Germans eventually used those techniques in World War II. This political cartoon serves to show the close relationship between Hitler and Mussolini, as the two are shown as a happy married couple. Hitler is appropriately the groom and Mussolini the bride, as throughout the marriage, Germany often made many of the decisions, some of which Mussolini did not approve of, but was powerless to stop. This German and nationalist Franco regime with Italy brought Benito Mussolini and Hitler closer together. This close relationship could not be better exemplified than with the Pact of Steel, in which Germany and Italy promised to aid each other in the event that either country would wind up in war. The failure of the League of Nations and failure to uphold the non-intervention agreement led by Neville Chamberlain and Leo Plumade Hitler see Britain as less threatening and encourage him to become more aggressive in his policy towards international affairs.
The Soviet Union's drive into isolation serves to further exemplify the idea that Hitler's aid to the nationalists in the Spanish Civil War had a large impact on foreign affairs. As the war progressed, Joseph Stalin became concerned that the nationalists may win the war over the Republicans as a result of Hitler's excessive aid in the form of plans, men, weapons, and other resources. Taking the view that the extremely rightist nationalists would prove to be extremely detrimental to the Soviets, but the Republicans, at least, they're the common Soviet view of not wishing to have alien political or social ideas thrust upon the native ones, Stalin decided to aid the Republicans. However, due to the fact that the Republicans lost the war, many leftist factions within even the previously strong Soviet supporters began to alienate the Soviet Union. In addition to being alienated, the Soviet Union was also viewed with suspicion after it aided the Republicans, for it had signed and then withdrawn from the Non-Intervention Committee. This suspicion soon led to the Soviets taking complete blame for the war in the eyes of the Western powers. As Winston Churchill said, in a House of Commons speech on July 19, 1937, constitutional parliamentary government was being used as a mere mask, a screen to cover the swift, stealthy, and deadly advances of the extreme communist or anarchist factions, who saw, according to the regular program of communist revolutions, the means by which they could obtain power. It was when confronted with a situation like that this violent explosion took place in Spain. Paintings by Nazi Minister of Propaganda Joseph Goebbels, which depicted the barbaric atrocities of the communists and the honorable Nazi Party, served to further alienate the Soviets and change how the Western powers really viewed the Soviet Union until the end of the Cold War. France and Britain's relationship was also forever altered as a result of Hitler's aid to the Spanish Civil War. As historian William Frank concluded, after rather chilly relations during the Ethiopian crisis, the Spanish War brought out the similarities between Britain and France. This conclusion could not be truer, for France and Spain were the nations that developed and advocated the non-intervention agreement. After the war for both Britain and France, the non-intervention agreement eventually led to appeasement for Germany. For there were too many factions within both nations, as some, like Jill Edwards, argued, by turning a blind eye both to the intervention of the dictators and the need to protect British shipping in Spain. The British government aided Franco as decisively as if it had sent arms to him. And others, like French Prime Minister Léon Blum, said that the powers took no part in the Civil War. Furthermore, Germany had proven itself as once again a powerful nation that was able to cause mass destruction if they did not receive what they wanted. This cartoon perfectly exemplifies appeasement, as Germany is shown with one hand over the woman that represents the appeasing nations. France and Britain indeed continued to appease Germany jointly in the years directly after the Spanish Civil War and prior to World War II, through such acts as the Munich Agreement, through which both France and Britain informed Czechoslovakia that it could no longer resist German annexations, and through the Anglo-German Naval Agreement, through which both nations negotiated and allowed the Germans to build its navy up to 35% the size of the British fleet. With these shared interests and similarly evolving goals in mind, France and Britain drew closer together and began to once again form the alliances that had been critical to becoming the victors in World War I, and an alliance that would emerge again even stronger in World War II. Many may disagree with the idea that Hitler's aid to the nationalist Franco regime during the Spanish Civil War was the key cause in altering international relations. Some may say that the French and British were really the ones that altered the course of the war with their refusal to aid the Republicans. As this cartoon indicates, these people believe that through the non-intervention agreements, the Western European powers allowed the nationalists to receive excessive aid, and in effect, it was these Western powers that altered the course of international relations during the Spanish Civil War. Other critics say that it was not the Western powers, but rather the Soviet Union that altered the course of international relations during this time, as they withdrew themselves from the non-intervention agreement and gave themselves cause to be alienated by the other powers and allowed those powers to form alliances. Yet still others say that it was the United States policy of isolating itself and refusing to be mediators in a situation that could have been avoided that resulted in the close alliances formed between France and Britain and Germany and Italy. These same accusers of the United States say that it was their first Red Scare that resulted in a general mistrust of communist Soviet Russia among the Western democratic powers and resulted in the eventual isolation of the Soviet Union. Despite these arguments that seem to prove that it was not Hitler's intervention on the side of the nationalist Franco regime, there are way too many gaps, exceptions, and questions that these arguments arise to be true. The only valid and strong explanation of the alteration of international affairs as a result of the Spanish Civil War rests with Hitler's intervention in the war in support of Franco's rightist regime. The strengthening of Hitler's Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union's isolation, and strengthening of British and French relations through non-intervention and appeasement all come together to prove that it was indeed Hitler that changed the course of European relations during and after the Spanish Civil War.